and welcome to FHS's English digital class for Standard 7. This is your English teacher Swarnali Roy, and today we are going to start class on English 2, which is grammar. The topic for today's class are the verbs do, does and did. Let us understand what are do, does, did and why are they important. Do, does and did are verbs. In the present tense, we use do and does, while representing the past tense, we use did. Do, does and did are used to form basic sentences. They are used as helping or auxiliary verbs together with the main verb in its base form. For example, we can see the diagram here. You can see that in the present tense we use do and does. Do is used with I, you, we and they, while does is used with he, she or it. In the past tense, we use did with all the pronouns that are listed here. And while making questions, we write do, does or did at the beginning of the question. For example, do you speak English? Does he speak English? Did you speak English? Or did he speak English? In all of these examples, do notice that the main verb is in its base form, which means that the main verb does not change with regard to change in tense. For example, the main verb here is speak. So, we do not use s at the end of this word, or spoke or spoken. It remains in its base form, which is speak. Similarly, if we take the word write, then we need to frame the question as do you write in English? We cannot use the words written or wrote. We need to use only the base form of the verb. The usage and applications of do, does or did. We already know that do is used with I, you, we and they, whereas does is used with he, she and it. Here are some examples as well. I do my laundry on Saturdays. Here, do is used with I. Next example. They do their chores when they arrive home. Do is used with they here. Next example is he does nothing all day. So, does is used with he. And in another example, she does charity work when she has time. So, does is used with she. Next, moving on to the examples of did. Did is used with all the pronouns. For example, I, you, we, they, he, she and it. So the examples are I did my homework in record time. We did everything we could to help. He did a somersault on the trampoline. And as you can see the diagram, it is listed clearly here that with the pronouns I, you, he, she, it, we and they, what are the auxiliary or helping verbs used? And in negative form, it is used as do not, does not, with their abbreviations as don't and doesn't. While In past tense, all of these helping verbs do and does become did. And in the negative form, in past tense, it becomes didn't or did not. Now, let's look at how to frame questions with the use of do and does. So to make a question in the simple present tense in English, we normally put the helping verb do or does at the beginning of the question or before the subject. For example, the positive sentence or the affirmative sentence, "You speak Arabic," becomes the question as "Do you speak Arabic?" where do is placed at the beginning of the question, then the subject you, and then the main verb, which is speak. The main verb is in its base form. Next example contains the use of does. In the positive or affirmative sentence, "He speaks Arabic" becomes "Does he speak Arabic?" Does comes at the beginning of the question, then the subject he, and then the main verb speak, which is in its base form. Let us learn how to use did in questions. To make a question in the past tense in English, we normally put the helping verb did at the beginning of the question or before the main subject. Both do and does in present tense questions become did in the past tense questions. For example, in the present tense, if we write "Do they live in Spain?" in the past tense, we need to write "Did they live in Spain?" Similarly, in the present tense, if we write "Does she live in Spain?" in the past tense, it becomes "Did she live in Spain?" Now, how to use don't, doesn't and didn't in negative sentences. To make a negative sentence in English, we normally use don't or doesn't in the present tense. For example, in the positive or affirmative sentence, "You speak Spanish" will be transformed into negative sentence, "You don't speak Spanish." So we can understand that don't, doesn't and didn't are placed between the subject and the main verb. Here you can see that don't is placed between you, which is the subject, and speak, which is the main verb. Let us look at another example. He speaks Spanish. It gets transformed into the negative sentence, "He doesn't speak Spanish," which again means that doesn't sits between the subject he and the main verb speak. So, when the subject is he, she or it, we add doesn't between the subject and the verb to make a negative sentence. Notice that the letter S at the end of the verb in the positive or affirmative sentence disappears in the negative sentence. Moving on to didn't. In the past tense, didn't is used to make a negative sentence for all the subjects, be it I, you, we, they, he, she or it. Now look at this example. They don't live in Japan. This is a sentence in the present tense. Therefore, when we are to write it in the past tense, it will be they didn't live in Japan or they did not live in Japan. Another example is He doesn't live in Japan. In the past tense, it becomes he didn't live in Japan. The main verb is in its base form. The helping verb didn't shows that the sentence is negative and in the past tense. Moving on to the use of do, did and does for emphasis or stress. This means that when we use do, does or did with a little bit of force while speaking, then we are using it for emphasizing something or stressing on something. For example, I do want to go. We put stress on the word do to emphasize that we want to go. He does like spinach. You may be surprised, but yes, he likes spinach. That is the meaning of the sentence. I did study, which means contrary to what you may believe. That means you might not believe that I did study, but I did my studying at the right time. The main verb is always in its base form. It is always true in the case of do, does and did. Be it a question, negative sentence or a positive sentence. Every time the main verb used with do, does and did will be in its base form. Note that do can also appear at the beginning of a sentence to emphasize the importance of that verb. For example, do call when you arrive. So we are emphasizing on the verb call. Do tell him that I will be waiting for him. We are emphasizing on the verb tell. Thank you and have a great day ahead.